The following is a production of UNO Television for KYNE TV. Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Allegiant Health and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome again to UNO. Consider this. You've decided that for the new year you're going to lose weight, get organized, get your financial life together. Then you look at the first two and you go, well, I don't think I'll be able to lose weight or quit smoking or anything like that. And I might get organized, but I definitely think I want to tackle that financial thing. But you don't know where to start. We have some folks here that will kind of get you tuned in and turned on to saying it's not as complicated as you might think it is. With me today are three folks I am proud to introduce to you. Denny Morrison works with, now, is it Morgan Stanley Dean Witter?
That's right.
Did I get it all right?
You
They
got it
changed the names. Used to be Dean Witter something or other. And he's been in the business almost 3 decades. Next to him is Sonia McAllister with Kirkpatrick Pettis, and she's been in about half that time, 14 years or so. And also with us today is an old TV compatriot of mine, former meteorologist, well, he's still a meteorologist, but he formerly worked at Channel 7, decided to get into the stock brokerage business.
Yes.
Been actually working at it, for about 14 months. So we've got, we've got sort of a variety of people in terms of their longevity in the business. Let's see how diverse they are and what they have to tell you. I'll start with Denny. I've actually known you longer, so it's easy for me to remember you were the longest in the biz. People are afraid, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, unless you get the guys that come in and they know everything, done all their homework, but that's few and far between.
Well, the standard line is that people spend more time working on a vacation than they do on their financials. And it's really not that difficult once you quit procrastinating. But the first thing you have to do is you have to find out where you are. You have to take that balance sheet approach, take a picture of where are my financials today. That's the starting point. And I think everybody needs to do that. Just sit down and take a balance sheet to all the assets you own, the 401k plans, the savings accounts, the IRAs, what kind of college education funds do you have going. Whatever it is, just take a picture of it and find out where you're at.
Okay,
and
Sonia, what if I don't even have, I can do a 401k, but I don't have many assets. I own my car, I own my house. So my picture's pretty, well, it lacks a little contrast, to be blunt. Should people not come in and see you?
Not at all. And in fact, actually, one of the things that usually goes along with that picture is debt, where not only do you not have any assets, but it's perhaps the case that you also have an accumulation of debt. And in many cases, it's also high interest debt accumulated on a credit card. Very often in those kinds of instances, the first thing that I'll tell somebody is that's the very best investment you can make right now is whittle the debt down, then come back and see me and let's start on the next phase of accumulation. And it's not true, although I think a lot of people believe that you have to have a lot of money in order to be able to have something to invest. There are all kinds of tools that can be used today to begin accumulating with very small amounts of money. And if you make it a habit and start using small amounts of money and setting them aside on a regular basis, the power of compounding almost can't screw it up.
Well, speaking of little amounts of money, long before my friend Scott went to Piper Jaffray, I've had Piper Jaffray take a little, this has been going on for a long time, take a little bit out of my paycheck every month. And I didn't even realize when I said to him, hey, it's the first of the year, I called him up to invite him on the show. I said, when I get $500 in there for that, I want to do that educational IRA for my son. He says, well, you've already got it. I mean, I feel stupid admitting that I didn't know how much money I had. But little bits do add up.
That's true. That's true. Just the compounding effect of your interest, you end up...
As paltry as it was in that little account.
Exactly. But now you have $500 to work with, and you didn't really realize it before, but it does take a while for that to happen. But now you've got it, and the main thing you need to do is put that to work. The best way to stay invested or to make money with investing is to remain fully invested with the assets that you can invest.
Okay, now there are all kinds of tools. You've mentioned that. And I remember when I was at Channel 7, they had a 401k that had some matching capability. And a lot of people, I was earning enough that it was comfortable for me to say, okay, take the max out so I can maximize my pre-tax stuff. But so many people, when we first got the 401k, said, well, I'll just put a little in. And in it, because things were tough. Things were tight in their house. They had the car, the car debt and then the house mortgage and kids coming up through the ranks. And gradually they came to realize, maybe I never missed this money in the first place. Maybe I can put a little more in.
Well, everybody's situation is different, Carol, and there are homesteads that have financial arrangements where they really can't take advantage of all of that, what the company will match. But the most important thing you need to do with your paycheck is pay yourself first. And if you can pay yourself first with tax-free money, tax-deferred money, and then get a match on top of that from the company, that's the best return you'll ever get. It's called free money. And it's also part of your paycheck. So if you have a 6% 401k matching fund, meaning that the company will give you 6%, if you start out by putting 6%.
That's a very good company.
You think, well, a lot of them are doing about that level, in some cases even higher. And if you aren't taking that, you are telling them, no thanks, I don't want that compensation. That's really what you are doing, because
that's
it's
kinda
yours.
crazy.
So if you can pay yourself first up to that max and get that matching contribution, that's 100% return on your money, and it's all coming tax deferred. How can you push on that one? That's a wonderful tax advantage, and it's a wonderful compensation plan that the company's offering you.
Most people probably do dabble in things themselves, and I have found that it's I feel like a rudderless ship.
You said dabbling. That's what that causes. Dabbling
Right.
causes being rudderless.
Well, and I know that, and so that's why
not
one
a
of
plan, I guess,
my
is what I'm
personal
saying.
goals this year is not to be rudderless. I may steer into a wrong port once in a while, but I plan on still having a nice little global trip that'll end up in a nice retirement. But I think there are a lot of people like me. Is that right?
I would say too that we hear this word about diversification, and some people misunderstand that.
Well, it scares me. They talk about stocks and bonds and this, and I said, just stick here.
Yeah, well, the diversification piece is an important one, but I think for a lot of people they misunderstand that and think that means that if I just own a little of this and a little of this and a little of this and a little of this, then I guess that means I'm diversified. When in fact they may not be diversifying at all. They just own different kinds of things, but they don't understand how much overlap they may have in the things that they do own. So it really does require sitting down and figuring out an asset allocation. That's usually what we refer to it as. A group, in other words, how much of my money do I need to put into something that's going to generate growth versus something that's going to generate income based upon how many years I have until I retire or what my overall time horizon is, and my tolerance for variability from time to time. You got to be able to sleep at night.
In other words, that risk, how much risk you're willing
That's
to
right.
take.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things when a client or a prospective client comes into us. Our main goal is to figure out how much risk they can assume, and they have probably a pretty good idea of how much risk they can assume, but we tend to fine-tune that. And then once that's determined, then we can go ahead and look at their time horizon and determine what type of investments are correct for that individual. And that's where asset allocation and the planning come into effect. When someone sits down with a financial advisor, such as any of us here, that's our job.
Okay, now there's probably a kind of a chicken and the egg thing. Some people will say, I know nothing, and so what should come first is I ought to bop into one of you guys' office, and you'll just just tell me what I need to do and everything. And then there's that would be the chicken. And then the egg would be, well, maybe I need to get something like they have here at the UNO bookstore, Investing for Dummies, and I need to memorize it and take it to heart. And I need to be able to read that really fine print that I now need a magnifying glass with, the newspaper of all the stocks, and commit the abbreviations for all the stocks to memory. I mean, there's something in between, isn't there?
Yeah.
What should there be? Number one, if you had to recommend some boning up, not memorization, you're not being tested on this by your stockbroker, what would you recommend? Just basic stuff to get me started.
Well, to start with, if you are an online subscriber to the internet, there's so much information available just by doing point and click now. It's absolutely incredible. And some of the
And that's
new...
not threatening. You can do that alone by yourself.
Absolutely, and they don't even know that you're asking the questions. That's the good news. But there's some awfully nice services out there where you can subscribe to Schwab Online now. I hate to mention a competitor like that, but they've got a fine service now that for a fee you can access a tremendous universe of information
I found
in the
one
privacy
today.
in the privacy of your home. Nobody's going to pressure you, and you're not going to get any feedback from it. So
Yeah, I found one today called AskRoy.com.
Sure.
You can subscribe to it.
Or you can call MorganStanley.com. We're trying to get in the internet business now too.
And they
There's-
all will
We want to
be.
get our stock in
Everybody
so
will
we
be.
figure if we go to a .com, we might be able to do that.
Well, .coms are pretty good. Look
They're
at
pretty
Amazon.
hot. Yeah.
Well, I
talking
think-
about risk tolerance, that was one thing. We're getting a lot of calls now. Why didn't you tell me to buy that American Online? And they forget about risk tolerance that we established.
That was pretty
much.
risky.
These are highly speculative investments right now, and
Like
they're-
wireless
they're-
phones were some time back, and cellular and things.
Yeah. It's a market that you.
Okay,
gotta
so
be-
you say go online, look around.
You can do that very easily if you have access to an online system.
Okay.
That's one I would suggest.
Sonia, what would you suggest?
In fact, actually, that's probably what I would have suggested. Now, that wouldn't have been something that we would even have thought of 5 years ago. So, I mean, amazing how time changes things pretty dramatically. And also on the internet, it will refer you to some really excellent publications. And if you decide you want to go to the library and do a little, poking around there, that helps too. I guess the one thing that I guard against with people is, you say that there is that person who says, well, I'm gonna read up and I'm gonna learn everything that I need to know before I get started. And the danger in that is that you end up procrastinating even further and just don't get started. Right. So you don't need to know everything that there is to know. You do need to understand some basic concepts.
Investment classes, I
Yeah,
think, is probably
yeah.
what categories of investments are there, and then what levels of risk do they have.
Enough just so you know how to ask questions.
Right. In other words, you have a better feel for what's the difference between a stock and a bond and what purpose do they serve.
And what motivates each in the market.
Exactly.
Which is a
Yeah.
big thing today with the international game as it is.
I think Denny's right when he mentions the internet, but I think also you have to take kind of a grain of salt with that, because
Anything
there's
on the
so
internet.
much information out there, you
Powerful.
can become overwhelmed with it. And there's also a lot of misinformation when you get into the specifics of, let's say, an individual company. There are a lot of websites out there that are simply chat rooms where you can get the rumors, where you can get the speculation.
You mean promotion rooms?
Yeah,
That's right.
and some of these companies do have people out there that specialize in promotion, and they go into the chat rooms and they pump
And
these
they act like
companies
normal
up.
people
Right,
Yeah.
right.
chatting away.
I like to do a fair amount of reading, and it's great when an educated investor comes to talk to me. I love that. I like Kiplinger's. You can pick that up at any grocery store. It's a magazine. Also, Smart Money magazine is very good. And if you really want to get in depth, I think maybe reading Barron's. That's probably a good idea.
Well, Kiplinger and Smart Money are ones that I could always tolerate in terms of their vocabulary, and I'm not talking about common speaking vocabulary, but the nomenclature of the financial world, and they have articles that are more written for a general population. They're a general population periodical instead of something you guys would pour over.
The Wall Street Journal is intimidating. I mean, it's huge, it's
It
thick,
is.
it's all small print for
Yeah.
even the magnifying glass reading. But there are condensed versions of information that are accessible to anyone that wants it. For a 50-cent piece, you can have a USA Today. They have a very brief but full of information in their money section that gives you just a ton of information, not just in the local markets, but worldwide.
Well, one of the things that I think that we overlook in the general population, and we even overlook in our lives, is that Warren Buffett has the theory that he buys what he knows and understands.
Right.
He likes cherry Coke. Berkshire Hathaway buys Coke stock, but that's a place to start. Say you know something or you've been interested in something, so you know what it is. Well, maybe learn a little more about it by reading up more on the financial end.
The great investor Peter Lynch, that ran the Fidelity Magellan Fund for 15 years and was always #1, has said it many times: pay attention to your own consuming behavior and be on the lookout for opportunities to present themselves. And he gives the analogy in his first book about his wife coming home with the legs pantyhose and the little plastic egg, and then her being so impressed with the product, and he said, well, that must be a really interesting company. So he checked it out, researched it, bought it. It got taken over by, I think it was Hanes first, then Sara Lee took it over, and he ended up with about a 15 times return on his money, all because his wife brought home something that he thought was really interesting and she really liked it. So it was, his own consumerism or their family's consumerism that found that for him. And keeping your eyes open oftentimes can present those for you.
And that's, I guess I'd like to contrast that with, the hype or the hot tip that you hear at the cocktail party or whatever. That's not the same thing. And in fact, actually, by the time you hear it, the information is old news. By the time it shows up in the Wall Street Journal, it's probably a few days old, and by the time it shows up in Forbes magazine, it's probably 2 months old. So buying stock in that company at that point in time may not really be a very good buy at all. So you have to be careful about getting caught in the hype.
Anyone that believes that they get all the information in the world in Omaha, Nebraska, better believe that it's known all over if it's known here.
That's right.
And especially in this world of communication today.
Nowadays, we've got CNBC, CNN-FN. There's a lot of stuff out there. You listen to these commentators or anchors on TV, and they spit out a lot of jargon, and they tend to pump up these stocks, and they go to astronomical levels so quickly, and some of our investors may be watching this and they might get hooked on the idea that they must own this company, that this company, say, has the cure for cancer. And I've had it happen with some of my clients who perhaps have called in and said, look, I need to sell everything, I want to dump it all into this one equity. And it's just amazing what media now can do to the price of stocks. I think we're seeing that with some of these internet
exception might be the company that made Viagra, if you got it at the right time.
True.
But there are so many stocks out there. But at least if you kind of maybe are interested in something, it's a good way to learn. Follow it for a while. Maybe tips. I mean, as you said, when I get somebody gives me a stock tip, I'm going, I know it's been around the block and back, and it's probably already got most of the movement it's going to get in the short term. So, but on the other hand, let's go from the micro of one stock at a time to mutual funds. Mutual funds have really been good for the everyday investor. They've served us well in terms of when IRAs came into being and then into fashion, and 401ks and other deferred compensation. So they've done us well, but it's getting now, there's so many of them, you almost have to, they're scary. There's a billion of those. You say, well, there's like 10 of these. Then I don't have to look at 4 billion stocks. But now,
there are actually more mutual funds than there are publicly traded companies. And when you stop and think about how huge that universe is, it is somewhat intimidating.
It all goes into the heading of professional management. That's the new in vogue game right now. Mutual funds started it, but then the privately tailored portfolios by professional managers is also very in vogue. There are so many choices now to have someone else manage your money for you that it's absolutely, it's all overloaded.
That's
so
the whole deal.
huge.
It's got me nuts.
That's right.
There are so many choices.
That's why you've got to decide where you are, where you want to get to. I'm talking financial with your game plan, and then go pluck from that product tree those specific investments that make sense for your risk tolerance and what each one of those little pockets are trying to accomplish for you in your game plan. not the broker's game plan.
Okay, but
your game plan.
You know, there are a lot of people out there that say there's financial planners, registered financial planners, and then there's stockbrokers, and I think even then stockbrokers got kind of a bad rap for a while. Financial planners looked pretty, and I'm not touting either one, but it looked pretty good because they don't, you know, get a certain percentage necessarily every time they buy and sell, and stockbrokers do. And then we've got all your discount stockbrokers, and obviously you would make the case for personal attention, but you know, do you think you should at least start out with someone?
Well, you need to have diversification. We kind of threw that word out at the beginning, but if you can't have someplace between 10 and 15 stocks, if you're going to buy stocks, be in the equity market, and if you can't afford to buy that many in different industries and different pockets of whatever they're doing, then you probably should use a professional manager that would give you that diversified product within one package. And the interesting thing, it isn't necessarily whether you're going to be bad or good about picking your stocks. It's just go out and buy a package of stocks and have one of them do poorly and see what it does to your total return in the package. It can be devastating to have one stock just go down badly. The pros have that instantaneous information accessible to them all the time. Every stock in their portfolios, I'm talking a mutual fund now or a professionally managed portfolio, gets scrutiny 100% of the time that market's open. It just is really the best backup there is for making sure that the information overload doesn't disrupt your thinking for your plan. Let that professional manager take care of that for you.
But I don't know what you just said about a portfolio.
If you had a portfolio of 10 stocks, you picked those yourself,
Okay.
and one of them did poorly.
Okay, I understand that part.
Okay, but now if the professional manager, very seldom does he take a stock that he'll own at 50 down to 10. He won't let that happen. There's going to be a decision made as this problem is occurring where he's going to say,
So if you look away or go on a vacation or
that's right.
or leave the country.
That money is being scrutinized 100% of the time, no matter what you're doing, whether you're home or gone or whatever, it doesn't make any difference. So the professional manager has become so in vogue because of the information side of the equation and the instantaneous movement of stocks to that information. It's not at all unusual to see a stock go up 10, 15, 20 points in a day or down today based on this information pipeline that exists out there.
It's just kind of like the idea of, you know, he or she is a professional manager. That's what they do every day, all day long.
100% of their time.
And that's what they're paying attention to. Whereas if you're doing your own thing, you know, Denny mentioned the fact that if you have a stock in a 10-stock portfolio that, you know, hits the skids, it does a terrible thing to your total return. Well, for a fairly new investor, it also does terrible things to your psyche. And the problem then is, you know, then maybe I should sell all my stocks and not do this anymore and go back to ground zero and sit and be afraid again, which is absolutely what you don't want to have happen. So the idea of having professional management certainly does have its positives.
Well, Scott, you before you joined the ranks of the stock brokerage world, you know, a little over a year ago, you were an individual investor. I mean,
Yes.
this is kind of how you got into it. What's the difference between how you looked at things when you just started dabbling? And you did dabble.
Well,
You just
yeah, I
dabbled.
did, but I did it in a very conservative manner when I turned 18. I mean, it was very simple.
You started way back then?
Yeah, yeah, I did. And I'm very thankful that I was educated by my parents as to going out and managing my own money and looking at different companies. But I started out with utility stocks when I was young. Now, the one thing that I did learn is it's much easier to sleep at night when you own a mutual fund because you have that professional money management backing you up on that. You know, they set the criteria for the individual companies that they own. If a company is in that mutual fund and it doesn't measure up, they boot it out.
They don't have the emotional attachment that you as the individual would have to a name that you picked.
Yeah, I
Because
bought
you have-
Jiffy Lube
Okay.
because I had emotional attachment, and
You-
we all know what happened
That's
to
right.
that years
You
ago.
have to accept two things. It's failing, and you made a mistake. And to cut that mistake, you have to cut that stock out of there and admit it. Instead
that's-
of,
that's a
and
tough
know
thing
it's
for
going to
people
get
to do.
better. And that's a tough thing for people to do. That professional manager does not have that emotional attachment, unless he's got a lot of money in the portfolio too, which he could have. But they have standards they set for those stocks, and when they hit a certain loss percentage, usually they'll cut them out.
You know, the other thing too, with the, you know, with fluctuations in prices, you know, that isn't enough information with which to make a decision about whether you ought to sell a position out of a portfolio or not. In other words, if the price of a stock goes down, it may be a reason to buy more. But unless you have enough information about the company and the ability to make a judgment about whether this is a short-term problem that creates a buying opportunity or a long-term problem that means you really better sell it for what you can get out of it now and be done with it and go on to something else. So it does require knowing more about the individual company than just being able to watch the price go up or down.
Most of the portfolio managers visit the companies they own in their portfolio personally. Go to the company's site, meet with the chairman, the CEO, the chief financial people, the marketing people. They go talk to their customers. The individual can't do that.
Okay, let's just talk about the little bit of volatility we've had. We just saw yesterday, we're taping this on Thursday, we saw the stock market go up, it's kind of coming down a little today. The Asian crisis, I still don't think we're out of, I mean, that's sort of hanging in the back of my mind, a little scary that we haven't seen all the ramifications.
Hanging in the back of the market's mind, too.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's very much there.
Yeah.
So maybe I think, well, maybe this isn't a good time to even get into it. Maybe I'll just put it in a CD or whatever. Obviously you would say, no, don't put your light under a bushel basket. But is there any better time to get in, any worse time to get in?
Market timing really accounts for so little of your total return over long periods of time. And I guess if you're looking at investing in stocks, you shouldn't be putting money into stocks that you can't afford to leave alone for at least 3 to 5 years. And I usually tell people that we're looking at really a 10-year or more time horizon. So
I have the benefit of being the old person here. The lowest Dow Jones average I've seen is 575.
Yeah.
And today at 9,400 and whatever it is, I'd say that the importance isn't market timing, it's time in the market that's really going to make your performance work for you.
And that whole thing that they keep saying about dollar cost
Absolutely.
averaging.
If you're putting money in every month, and that's what you're doing in a 401k plan. If you pick a good Fidelity Magellan, just throw that name out, because it's in a lot of 401k plans as a choice. Every month you're buying some shares, no matter what the economy's doing, no matter what the market's doing, and over time you get a nice, smooth, average cost curve. And if they continue to do well, the economy does well, that will be a good investment for you.
That is kind of like it's a forced habit for investors, is they're forced into making that commitment. Pre-tax dollars dropped into the 401k. If you're not in that 401k, you might set your sights on dropping money into a Roth IRA, $2,000 on an annual basis.
Education IRA for your child.
But there are options, and it really isn't, it's not that scary. I mean, I can do this, right? Anybody can do this.
It can become scary, I think, because of the amount of information that's available to investors now. It has become a little bit more difficult for the individual investor to actually choose the correct investments, and I think we act as filters.
So you're going to
for
take
that.
the pledge to make it simple, to the point, for all of us this year if we come
all
to you,
three
right?
of us would agree that the most important thing we do is education.
Yes.
And I mean, really, it takes a lot of time. When people come in for a first meeting with me, it's usually an hour to maybe even up to 2 hours of time.
Well, so get started this year. The most important thing to me right now is to get out of this show on
You
time.
got to get started.
So, Denny Morrison, Sonia McCollister, Scott Meehl, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
luck
you.
this year, everyone. Put some of that money away.
There you go. Thanks.
Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Allegiant Health,